There's always one person in the friend group who says yes to everything. Plans they don't want to go to, favors that inconvenience them, arguments they don't actually agree with, but nod along anyway. Everyone calls them the nice one. What almost nobody notices is that the nice one is running on empty, and has been for years. By the end of this video, you'll understand why people-pleasing isn't kindness at all. It's a nervous system doing everything it can to stay safe. This pattern is quietly everywhere. Group chats where one person always volunteers to organize. Coworkers who take on extra work rather than say the deadline isn't realistic. Partners who apologize first, even when they weren't wrong. None of this looks like a problem from the outside. It looks like a good personality. That's exactly why it goes unaddressed for so long. Psychologists have a name for this: the fawn response. Most people know fight, flight, and freeze as the body's reactions to threat. Fawn is the fourth, and the least talked about. Instead of fighting a threat or running from it, the fawn response tries to appease it, to make the danger like you enough that it backs off. For a lot of people pleasers, this pattern didn't start in adulthood. It started young, often in homes where a parent's mood was unpredictable, and staying agreeable was the safest way to avoid conflict. The nervous system learned a rule early: keep everyone calm and you'll be safe. That rule doesn't turn off just because the original threat is long gone. The term fawn response itself comes from trauma therapist Pete Walker, who added it to the classic fight, flight, and freeze model, after noticing it consistently in survivors of chronic childhood stress. It's a relatively recent addition to psychology's vocabulary. One more sign of how overlooked this pattern has been compared to the other three. Picture someone at work whose manager asks them to take on a project that's clearly not theirs to handle. Every instinct says, "This is too much," but what comes out of their mouth is, "Sure, no problem, happy to help." Not because they weighed it and decided it was fine, because the idea of the manager's face falling, even slightly, feels more threatening in the moment than 3 extra hours of unpaid work tonight. That's not a scheduling decision, that's a nervous system choosing perceived safety over their own capacity. Or picture it in dating. Someone matches with a person who consistently cancels plans last minute. Instead of naming how that feels, they say, "No worries, totally understand," 3 times in a row, all while quietly writing the relationship off in their head, without ever giving the other person a chance to know something's wrong. The other person walks away thinking everything was fine. The people pleaser walks away exhausted and slightly resentful over a conversation that never actually happened. Here's what people pleasing actually costs, and it's rarely visible from the outside. Chronic resentment that has nowhere to go because the person can't admit, even to themselves, that they're angry. A blurry sense of their own preferences because they've spent so long tracking everyone else's mood that they've lost touch with their own. And exhaustion that doesn't match their actual workload because performing agreeableness all day is its own form of labor, even when nothing productive got done. From the outside, this person looks fine, easygoing. Even on the inside, they're running a second full-time job nobody else can see. Let's clear up 3 myths about people who do this. Myth 1, they're just naturally kind. Kindness is a choice made freely. People-pleasing is a reaction made out of fear, and the difference matters more than it sounds. Myth 2, they don't have opinions. Most people-pleasers have very strong opinions. They've just learned that sharing them isn't worth the risk. Myth 3, they enjoy helping so much that it doesn't tire them out. Helping from genuine desire is energizing. Helping from fear of disappointing someone is depleting. Even when the task itself is identical, same action, completely different internal cost. The clearest way to tell the difference: ask whether a no would still feel safe to say in that moment. If yes is coming from genuine willingness, and no was always a real option, that's kindness. If no feels dangerous, even mildly, even with someone who would probably be fine with it, that's the fawn response driving the decision instead. Here's the belief underneath almost all of this. Somewhere along the way, The person absorbed the idea that having needs is a burden on other people, not consciously. Nobody sits down and decides this. It gets built from small, repeated moments. A parent who sighed when asked for help. A friend who got cold after being told no. Over enough repetitions, the nervous system draws a conclusion. My needs cost me relationships. So the safest strategy becomes erasing the needs before anyone else has to react to them. This is also why boundaries feel selfish to a people pleaser, even when they're completely reasonable. It's not a logical belief. It's a trained association between having a need and losing connection. And beliefs that are trained in the body take longer to unlearn than they took to seem obvious. Quick check. 1. You agree to things in the moment and only feel the resentment building afterward, sometimes hours later. 2. You rehearse how to say no in your head and almost never actually say it. 3. Other people's slight disappointment feels heavier to you than your own exhaustion. If 2 or more of these sound familiar, this isn't a personality quirk. It's a pattern your nervous system picked up somewhere, and it can be unlearned. Research on assertiveness training backs this up in a very specific way. People who practice saying no in low-stakes situations, small things, not the big scary ones, report a measurable drop in anxiety around conflict over just a few weeks. The nervous system doesn't need convincing through logic. It needs actual evidence, repeated. That disagreement doesn't lead to the disaster it's been bracing for. That's why simply deciding to stop people-pleasing rarely works on its own. The body needs new proof, not a new opinion. So here's where to actually start. First, practice with something small. Decline a minor request this week. Nothing high stakes, just something you'd normally auto-agree to. Second, build in a pause. Replace an instant yes with, "Let me check and get back to you." That single sentence buys your nervous system time to catch up with your actual preference. Third, notice the discomfort without obeying it. The urge to fix someone's disappointment immediately is exactly the fawn response in action. Sitting with it, instead of rushing to smooth it over, is the actual practice. Fourth, expect the discomfort to feel disproportionate at first. Saying no to something small can trigger a wave of anxiety. That seems way bigger than the actual stakes. That gap between the size of the request and the size of your reaction is the fawn response talking, not an accurate read that's of the actual risk. Left unaddressed, this pattern doesn't stay mild. It tends to build toward a specific kind of burnout. Quiet resentment that eventually erupts sideways at the wrong person over something small and unrelated, because the real frustration never had anywhere to go. Or a slow withdrawal from relationships altogether because staying agreeable all the time became too exhausting to sustain. In work settings specifically, this often looks like someone who seems endlessly reliable, right up until they suddenly quit with no warning, leaving everyone stunned because the exhaustion had been building silently for months while they kept saying yes. Either way, the fawn response that once kept things safe ends up costing far more than the conflict it was avoiding. If any of this sounded like you're not weak, and you're not broken. You just learned a survival strategy that's outlived the situation that created it. Subscribe if you want more of this. We break down a new piece of human behavior every Tuesday and Friday. Next time, we're looking at why some people can't stop checking their phone, even when they genuinely want to put it down. If that's familiar too, you'll want to be here for it.